Material for the brain. Conversations for thinking bodies. Hello and welcome to the 8th episode of Material for the Brain podcast. My guest for today is Guillermo Justel, who is a yoga and a hand balancing teacher based in London, who is originally from Spain. Guillermo is also the co-founder of We Guild, which is a social network for self-employed people that helps absorb financial blows through the power of community. I met Guillermo for the first time in 2017 in an event that gathered a group of 30 very special individuals. And within this crowd, he struck me from the first moment as somebody who is worth paying attention to. What I really admire about him is that he's the kind of thinker that doesn't shy away from confronting paradoxes and interacting with conflicting propositions. And his engagement in the realm of social impact is a great example of his richness and complexion as a human being. So I hope that you will enjoy listening to him as much as I did. And as usual, leave your comments and thoughts with me so that we can continue the conversation together online. Hello, Guillermo. Welcome to my podcast. How are you, my friend?
I'm very good. Thank you, Matan. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, it's pretty nice to have this platform that I can invite people I like yourself, and share some time with. And yeah, and thank you for giving me the time and being present here. It's been quite some time since we met in real life, no? I think 2018 or something like that.
Yeah, something, at least that, because it was when you came to London, right?
Yes. I think it was.
Yeah. Oh no, maybe Austria was afterwards or was before?
I actually don't remember. No, it was before, I think. It was before.
Okay.
Yeah. How are you, man? What is up with you? Where are you?
I'm very good, thank you. And I'm in London where I live, although I've just recently moved to my girlfriend's temporarily, for at least for the lockdown. And yes, it's strange to say that I'm okay, that I'm good, because on a personal level I am, but it's a bit strange to, with all this stuff that is happening around the world, to say, yeah, I'm okay. Feel almost like a lack of empathy or something. But on a personal level, I cannot complain at all. I'm okay. I have managed to keep some work, which I'm sure that many of the people who have had to this general transition between face-to-face to Zoom. So we have not been hit as much as some other professions. It's not been great, but we've been able to do something. So in that sense, the economic aspect is very important. So I've been okay, and everything else personally as well. It's been good in spite of all this situation. But thank you.
And what are you doing actually at the moment? Like, what is the things you're busy with? Besides, I know that you're teaching online and your handstand practice, but what else are you doing?
Well, besides that you just mentioned, I'm mostly involved with the project that I've been involved with, I guess for at least, about 2 years. It's something that I remember when you came to London, I mentioned to you, it was just a sort of a general idea, which was to create an app. It's an app that allows for people to form social networks where they can financially gift each other money in a transparent and accountable way. That's something that has kept me busy for most of the time that I'm not doing anything related to handstands. And the nice thing is that because of that, I've been myself getting involved with coding, which has been very interesting, fascinating. I love it. Of course, we can talk later about, I guess, the downside on the physical aspect of, being stuck on a chair and all that, which is a very interesting duality that I find. But in a way, I'm trying to integrate, and I think that some people may have seen on my Instagram feed that I'm beginning to bring the coding things that I've learned through this project, bring them into developing mostly visual renderings of ideas that I have to do with training and teaching. handstand related for now. So that's been very interesting. How thinking, I may as well just put them together and allow them to synergistically feed off each other and see what comes out of it. That is bigger than the sum of its parts, just to put it like that.
I want to take you a little bit back to the past, because actually this is something that I'm not that aware of myself as well. If you can share with me a little bit, like, how did you get to where you are? Like, now that you are this guy who have an Instagram and you stand on one hand and pose in some crazy poses, like, how did you get there? What have you been doing, and what have led you to where you are on the physical level, and also on the other aspect of what you've just described, if that's of an interest of you?
Oof. Do you want me to get really deep into that? Give you a very pedantic answer.
Like we have around 1 hour and a half, so
okay.
You can calculate the proportion that you want to take for talking about your history. But I
would say, sorry.
No, I think it's just relevant for me and also for the viewer to just know a little bit, like, the context of where you're coming from. It really helps to understand why you think the way you think, and etc.
Well, I guess if we frame it just to keep it real, so to say, from the point of view of the physical discipline, I guess that I started devoting myself more than just on an amateur level to physical practices in my late 20s, when I started doing yoga, a bit of like a bit every day, and on that, taking it a bit seriously, and that kind of sucked me in a bit. And then from there was an evolution from the physical practice of yoga, or asana, some people think I should say, towards shifting to hand balance. And then eventually, about 9 years ago, I decided to commit to it, and kind of semi-professional, I would say, maybe 2-3 hours a day, 5-6 days a week, which is not really what practitioners do, but something that would allow me to improve enough with time, and I guess that it brought me to the point that I'm here. I mean, I don't really like thinking very much about where I'm going to go. I mean, I think that goal setting is a very important thing, but I think it can be overvalued at the expense of just enjoying the path and allowing the path to take itself. It's a bit of this thing about free will and just being in the present kind of thing. That would be sort of, I guess, the background to my physical practice. I mean, in terms of things that have led me to be here, I would say, well, everything has led me to be here. I mean, everything is a culmination of everything that happened. But I don't know whether this is enough for you from the point of view of, or at least more from the more relevant point of view to the physical practice aspect.
Okay, let's leave it to that, and I'm sure that we will touch these points through our conversation. So let's maybe start with what you've just described. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what is this network that you're developing. I remember talking to you in London and starting to hear about it. I think you name it We Guild, no?
Yeah. That's the name. Still has that name. We Guild.
We Guild. And maybe you can describe a little bit more, what is it, and why do you think it's also relevant for people like us who are involved in let's say working as freelancers in like, we are not at the top of the food chain of the economical reality. So yeah, maybe you can share a bit what it is.
Oh, I like that you're using the image of the food chain. The economic reality. I'm going to touch on that later, I'm sure. Okay, so what it is or the idea, I mean, people can check it. It's the website is already up there, and but hopefully it would be clear, but of course I'll explain it now. It's a social network where it works as a social network in that you can join with people that ideally, because of what it does, that you trust and in person. And the idea is that whenever anyone in your network, whether it's you or someone else, needs like, I could do with some cash, whether it's £10, sorry, should I say euros, 10 euros, 50 euros, or 200 euros, you ask your network, which is formed of those people that you accepted as friends for this, and their friends as well. So you have friends and friends. And the app sort of distributes the request for each people, and every person gets asked, okay, because how close you are to this person who needs help, you are asked suggestion. Of course, it's always suggestion. Everything is voluntary, to contribute €5, but the person can do 1, 2, 3, 0, maybe 10. And then that person gets the help. And what it does through a color coding of a visualization of the network, you can see whether most people or whether individuals in a group is got this sort of blob thing that moves with different colors for different particles. If it all goes towards green, it means that people have helped you more than you've helped them. And if overall goes towards blue, it means that you have helped them more than they have helped you. So it's a kind of intuitive way of connecting with the idea of the balance, so that you can make decisions. So you can say, I've helped lots of people lately, I cannot afford to help more. Or sometimes you could say, actually people have been helping me a lot. Kind of try to an intuitive way for things to kind of reach a homeostasis of help exchanges between people that goes beyond the 3 or 4 or 5 that you could normally keep up with if you were doing this face to face.
And what was the motivation or idea? Why do I want to be there? Why would I want to be part of it? Why would I want to help others and get help? It sounds maybe stupid when I ask it, because everybody maybe, for some people, it's intuitive to have the wish to help others and also intuitive to ask for help. But what was your motivation to create something like this?
Well, for those two things that you've said, I mean, normally most people, of course, there is a lot of subtleties and circumstances, but as a general thing, you can say that helping others feels good for most people, and being helped is useful. Now, you have taboos going on in there. You have, when it comes to being helped, especially when it comes to the earlier step, which is in order to be helped, you normally need to ask for help. There we're getting into the taboo of vulnerability in our societies, which is a tricky one to break. But the idea is, and the other one on the other side, when it comes to giving help, you come across the barrier of, is someone going to take advantage of me? So those are the two barriers that you normally get. If you get past those two, you could say, well, giving help, knowing that you're not going to get taken advantage of, normally feels great for most people. And being helped when you need help, having gone beyond the barrier of all the issues about vulnerability and all that, is great because, you get help when you need it. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think to a certain degree, yes. I think I don't know, for me, it touches so many fundamental things that relates to the human experience, this project, that I said that for me, the things that you just talked about are touching so much fundamental things about the human experience. No,
human. Sorry,
you mentioned like being vulnerable, asking for help, which is already a certain acknowledgement of vulnerability, and it's also to a certain degree the first step of developing self-responsibility. No, to acknowledge I'm in a situation that I need help, so I'm taking responsibility of it and I'm reaching out. And so how is it going with it? Like how many, is it growing, or what is the phases of this project? When did you launch it? How is it going? Like what type of people are attracted to be part of this network?
It's actually at early stages. I mean, I was very lucky because last year in March, I got a friend who decided to join for the coding element of it. So me and him developed for about 8-9 months a prototype, as you could call it, of the network. That it works on a phone, but it doesn't have, for example, the financial exchanges are not there yet, so it's not with real money yet. We have done a prototype with that, a pilot group, which was, I think, was 10-20 people more or less, and there was some feedback from that. And then we had two girls that joined, a French and a Spanish girl, and now it's 4 of us. We are actually on this Thursday going to talk with Co-ops UK to register as a company. Ideally, it will be as a multi-stakeholder cooperative, which I can go into in terms of what that means. And from there, once you are registered, is a much easier way to start raising funds through crowdfunding and things like that, in order to be able to make it a bit more sustainable. So we get some investors, because so far we've basically done everything for free. How it is when you start a business. And so that would be a nice starting point to start developing more seriously and start gathering more, developing a marketing, like a proper marketing strategy to try to get people to join in beyond those that we know, or the ones that we know. So that is the stage. From a practical point of view, that's the stage where it is at the moment. I mean, the idea is pretty much developed, although anything can change, of course. but it's more at this practical point of registration, fundraising. And then our goal right now is to develop a prototype that can be used by 100 people. And then from there, we'll start thinking about further strategies down the line.
Interesting. So maybe correct me if I understand it, if I understood it correctly, just that we're on the same page. So basically, if I'm in this network, I would have my closest friends, circle of people that I've accepted, a little bit like any other social network out there.
Exactly.
And then if I find myself in some financial crisis that I need support, I can ask I can make a request of a certain amount of money, and then it will be shared between my close friends and their friends, which is another deeper layer of my own network, which are the friends of my friends.
No? Exactly.
And then there is a certain calculation of which circle, which tier will share which type of part of the expenses. No, and the further you are from me, the less you would help me directly.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you quickly. It's a very simple calculation. It's nothing. It's not a massive, complex algorithm. So imagine that you have 10 friends, 10 close friends, and each of them have 10 friends, just to get it easy. So you have 10 close friends and 100 bad friends, and you need, say, 100 euros. Okay. So your close friends, they get allocated to 60%. So since they are 10, each of them would be requested to help you with £6, so 6 euros, whatever. And then the other ones, they are 100, and they would get allocated 40 euros of your request. That means that each of them would be requested to help you with 40 cents. Yeah, I was going to say pennies. 40 cents. And then it's up to them.
Interesting. So yeah, it's funny, but I find it very intriguing because it's like it immediately, shows, it reveals you your habits in relation to maybe the topic of trust. And yes. I've been working a lot in the physical realm, in partnering and group improvisation, and what does it mean to trust? What kind of relationship do I build? And the first thought that came to my mind when you describe this calculation is like, okay, so if I have a lot of friends, then I have more people to support me when I'm in a need. And then the second thought came to my mind, yeah, but then I will have to support also many others. Do I want that? And what kind of a relationship do I want to cultivate with the people? And so it's very intriguing, no? Like in a simple.
Yeah, it's funny because you mentioned trust in physical games, and it's all connected in a way, because obviously the trust that you can establish with someone when you are, I guess I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, BJJ or contact improvisation, is a very, very rich experience. Although it may not be relevant, you may have someone who is a very, very good dancer, and somehow you do not want to get into a financial exchange, but maybe not. Maybe it's likely, but it would be very interesting to see those correlations. In terms of the issue that you mentioned about having many friends, this, so far we have designed it so that you could have only a maximum of 20 close friends. I don't know if you are aware of this concept called the Dunbar number.
No.
Dunbar is he's still alive. It's British sociologist or anthropologist, I don't really know. But he came up with this theory, which is very popular now, called the Dunbar number, which basically says that you cannot have the human brain does not have the cognitive capability to keep track of more than 150 people. Yeah, okay. More than that, it's faces. It's just random faces. And then there is also something to do with layers, like I think it's 5 really close people, 10 or 20 family members. It's a funny thing because it's got something to do with the multiples of 5, and you cannot explain it. But it's the idea that beyond a certain point, it's anonymity comes in, and we wanted to make sure that didn't happen, because once you have, say for example, 200 close friends, you will not know them all enough, so you will not be able to keep track of all these people. So and the theory is that once anonymity kicks in, less responsible behavior comes in. You could become automated, but for now, we're going to keep it like that in order to make sure that you respect this idea of, okay, close friends, you only have 20, because otherwise they will really not be that close.
So if I have 20 friends and each one of them have 20 friends, so I will have 20 friends and I will have 400 people around me.
Yeah, no, I know that's beyond. I know that that's beyond 150.
No, I was just curious. No, because I was just trying to visualize the network for myself.
Yeah, no, you're totally correct. In a specific case that we say, since it's 20, so 20 to the times of, to the power, square of 20 is 400. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah, and I remember something that when I met you and you just started to describe me this idea, I think what came to my mind is a little bit, the image of a tensegrity model or fascia, or how the body function, in the sense that how pressure is being allocated into a system that is flexible.
Yes.
And how much of the inspiration for you for this model came from, let's say, working with your body, or you feel that it's like your mind came with these ideas completely separately, or like, do you see the relationship?
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Like, it's funny you mentioned that. I mean, because I don't think we've talked about this before. If you look at the video that we decided for Wicked, it's all based on tensegrity in a way, in the sense that the way that you find often in nature, in that systems are able to absorb a physical impact, is through distribution.
Guillermo, could you just shortly clarify the term tensegrity for those who might not be aware of it?
I mean, I wouldn't be an expert, but normally when I hear about tensegrous systems, are basically physical bodies that are formed of hard and soft parts. The soft parts, I guess, being elastic to some degree, but in such a way that the hard parts do not touch any other hard parts. And so that you have this sort of triangles made with bits of wood and with the rubber bands that you can do, or the more complex ones. And some people say that that is a very apt metaphor for the physical body, because when you think about it, no bone is really touching other bones. There's always lots of different types of tissues, kind of mediating. I never used that one in that case. Mediating in between. I like that.
Nice word.
You can say in between. Mediating is the same thing, Latin and English. Anyway, because then it creates this idea that, okay, you have the hard structures to do what they do best, holding some weight, but then you have the other structures to make sure that whenever there is a strong impact, you don't have, heart against heart, which then also has wear and tear, all that kind of stuff, which is different issues. Is that good enough of an explanation?
Yeah, I think so.
You caught me by surprise there. No, never thought I was going to explain that.
I understand it, just with the idea that you have object that can hold compression to a certain degree, and you have elastic object that can maintain tension, and then you connect the object that can contain compression through a network of object that can endure tension. So tension, like things that are being pulled, and then the structure becomes much stronger than just placing a lot of object that can just be compressed but never be not to be pulled apart. So yeah, but I think what you describe is more accurate. So let's go back to what you just started to talk. So we have this tensegrity model in our mind that is present in the body, and then how did it connect to you forming these ideas for this network?
I mean, it's because I was thinking, like, when you think about, I like establishing metaphors and parallelisms between how certain problems are solved in the mind space and how they apply to physical realities, or sometimes to social realities now, whether that's a physical or not, that's a story. So, for example, you can think of, like, if I want to go if I want to go 3 meters high to the first floor of a building, I mean, you cannot jump. It's really high. I mean, of course, if you do parkour, whatever. So what you do, you set stairs, which is like you break it down. That's the concept of breaking it down, So you have a physical representation of the concept of breaking it down, so that you can, climb one step at a time, so that you make it to the floor that you wanted to go, which you couldn't go in one single go. So when you think about how nature deals with the case of physical shock, you tend to see often that it's like the whole metaphor with the bamboo thing. It's elastic and all that. Sometimes even my man-made object, you look at like a trampoline or a pillow. It's like, how do they absorb impact? They spread the load. and they have a network. Sometimes they don't even need to be technically Tensegrity system, because you can have like a trampoline. Everything is soft. It doesn't even have heartbeats. It's just the way that it's woven together. And my idea was like, okay, if you establish the concept of a trampoline as a network of elements, whether in nature or not, a spider, whatever is elastic, if you put that onto the social network, how would you be able to spread the load? And you could say, well, you could have the center point. That's where the impact hits, in terms of, like, you could even say financial impact. I mean, that's where we actually base the visual metaphors of the video, like someone going down and then all the friends kind of pulling back together so that they can bring you up by sharing the financial shock, by you basically then giving money back. And then the idea also, it kind of very nicely fits with this idea we mentioned before about the Dunbar number, is that when you have a trampoline, the one where the weight goes is the one that goes deeper. And then the closer you are to that, the more you take the load, but then you distribute I like the word, dissipate it around it. And the further you are, the less you take, but it's like an architecture, like an elastic architecture that goes down and then goes up again. So you could say, well, that would be very nice for a social network, because if you had a neat enough social network, the Dunbar number is kind of the representation of, okay, those who are closest have a bigger, more at stake, because they know the person more, they can trust, so you put them into a bigger load, but then you dissipate. In fact, in the beginning, I had the idea of having 3 layers, friends of friends of friends, but too complicated. I think it's far too much. The idea is the same. Let's keep it simple like this. And that's kind of where it came. When you look at, I think it's called biomimicry. Sometimes you have these things of looking at how nature solves certain problems, whether they are mechanical problems or any other kind of problems, and say, okay, could we bring this into, you could say, into a physical reality? But then in this case, also, could you use that into our social reality in a way?
Yeah, and could you talk a little bit about the mechanism of what would prevent it from becoming corrupt?
Okay, I can tell you what we have thought. What do you mean by corrupt? That's
I'm in the network and I'm becoming like a vampire who just sucks, who always brings his issues and problems, and who maybe also, I don't perceive myself as a vampire. I perceive myself of like somebody who is really maybe, misfortune, or maybe I was born in a worse starting point, so I'm entitled to get more support, whatever. How do you prevent this? Maybe it shouldn't be equal, I don't know. Maybe it's okay that somebody is always asking more than what he's giving, because that's the type of friendship we formed with this person. But to a certain extent, if you push it, it could become corrupt, and or maybe I interpreted it already in a different way than how you interpreted it.
No, but it's a very legitimate question. I guess it's the number one question. How do you? It's the same kind of thing as how do you stop people from cheating in a way. I would divide that into issues. One of them is whether, you have not mentioned whether the people are lying. You have just mentioned whether people ask for too much. Is that right?
Yes, but you can also say that, we can also look at it as the idea of somebody who's just asking without really having the need. Then you would say that this is lying. No, somebody who's just like, he want to buy an iPhone and he asks for money and buys an iPhone.
First of all, even if you give money for a reason that is not legitimate or that is not true, this system of colors still keeps track of it. So you could say, you could even establish a relationship. It could happen in real life, that someone asks you for help. They always lie, but when you ask for help back, they always help you. Would you mind that they're lying?
I don't know. I think for me, maybe honesty would be something that I think it's a good value to maintain when it comes to partner work. But if I would mind, I just find it hard to imagine a situation where somebody is constantly being dishonest, but at the same time extremely empathic and considerable to others. Like, it's a certain internal paradox. Maybe it's possible to live like that.
I just gave you a very extreme example, obviously, but I was trying to illustrate the idea that the color system would allow for you to make the decision based on whether you've helped them a lot or not. If you know whether the reason is legitimate or not. And again, within legitimate, we're considering whether it's false or whether it's worthy of it. Then it's for you to decide. It's always ultimately up to the person to decide. But you know that if you decide to help, then that help will be accounted for, and you will be able to keep track of all the times that you've helped them, in contrast with how many times they've helped you or how much for. Okay. Does that answer your question? So in a way, you could say, sorry, that it's just like real life. You make the decision, you know. Of course, now it's more people, because now you would say that, well, but you are able to make those decisions normally when it's 5 or 6 people that are closest to you. And now you're talking about 20 people online and then 400 people potentially. Yes, but that is why we bring the colors in, because you are able to establish a relationship of trust with someone as long as you have enough information, even if it's very minimal, to establish a sense of reciprocity. And that's something that I think is connected to your dance background and with other things that I mentioned as well.
Yeah, what I'm also, like, it's for me, if I look at it a little bit backwards, and maybe it's because it's something that I'm very, let's say, busy at the moment thinking about, is this kind of tension between solidarity and self-responsibility. This, like, on one hand, it's like, I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to take care of myself. I'm not going to be dependent on others. I'm going to work hard in order to make sure that I can exist and maintain my lifestyle and the things that are important for me. And on the other hand, it's like, how do I pay attention to others? And together we are stronger than each individual, blah, blah, blah. And what I'm questioning, and I don't, and maybe it's a bigger question already from your project, but into more, let's say, human behavior, is what is the tendency and what is the capacity of us to shift from one side to the other? Because I see it, for example, in my personal life, that my wife and I, we are representing a little bit like opposing polars. So she's more attracted to the idea of solidarity, and I'm more attracted to the idea of self-responsibility. And most of the time, that's how we view life, and that's how we interact with each other. And I wonder to which extent people can actually adapt and become different than their starting point, and whether your project could be also in a certain way a tool for that, and not just so the project is not just a tool to help you in financial crisis, it's also a tool to assist you on self-reflection on the tension between these dynamics. What do you think?
I totally like okay, let's go first with the philosophical and then go back to the self-made man as opposed to solidarity. The thing that you mentioned last, totally, it is very connected to this thing I mentioned before about the taboos. So in a way, for this to work, which means that we're putting a bet, we are basically trying to, we're going against certain taboos, because and the taboos can only be broken when people feel confronted by something and say, okay, I need to think about this. What do I really feel about that? There is some places there that I think that for most people, at least in our culture, the ends are a bit conflicted with each other, but if you don't go really deep into it, you don't realize that there are certain inconsistencies. I have nothing against inconsistency. I think it's a very, sometimes it's good to have a bit of chaos. And I learned that from you. I remember that. But I think that, as you said, some of self-reflection is important in order to be able to break some taboos, if we think that may lead us into places that are better in the long run. If we are in a sort of cul-de-sac and we say, what is this idea of taking a step back by making some effort to reflect in order to take you forward in a different direction. So totally, that's the idea, in the sense that, and that idea strikes at the core of the duality that you've mentioned, which is whether solidarity and self-responsibility are actually, is there actually, how do you call that, like a dichotomy? I think that I would not call it self-responsibility, because I think self-responsibility, at least for me, has much more positive connotations. And at the other end of solidarity, I would put self-made man, individuality, overt individuality. And I think that, of course, in here you have a lot of issues to do with culture, society, and even economics, from the point of view of do you want to separate the individuals into isolated elements, when in our society, like we live in society, we are, of course, there is such a thing as free will, but you cannot think that everyone is one isolated island. You interact with other people. You go to school. You go on the street. Living in society. I mean, if someone, I would only accept someone saying I'm a self-made man if they were brought up in the forest by themselves, which is probably unlikely because you need a tribe to bring you up, at least in the first years of your
You will
life.
be eaten probably.
Yeah, of course. You need. I mean, with social animals, I mean, I think. Yeah, humans are the animals that are the longest useless, who are useless the longest. Like other animals, they can walk within a couple of hours of being out of the womb of the mother, right? Whereas humans need a long time. I don't know the exact numbers of that. So the idea is that it's not about taking self-responsibility away. I mean, this is almost like the whole dichotomy that you could dig down into the whole right and left, like, is there free will? And I believe that there is as much, you need to exert as much self-responsibility about your own actions as much, but be careful of falling into the idea that everything that happens to you is the result of your actions and nothing else. It's like some people say, you are responsible for how you react, but not for everything that happens to you. And then another issue is responsibility and fault. You may not, you are responsible for everything, but that doesn't mean that everything is your fault. And then, of course, you bring the issues with justice and welfare state, like, should the government help you for things that are not your fault? But wait a second, it's not always easy to define what is your fault, what is your responsibility, So we're putting all those questions away, whether, all the welfare state, I don't even want to go into that because it's a very big discussion whether wiggle is replacing the social contract and all that. But from the point of view of solidarity of friends, the idea is that because of this color coding system that allows for the reciprocity to ideally flourish because of how transparent it is in terms of the exact exchanges between you and other people, that the most responsible behavior comes out. Because in the case, for example, that you said before about someone who is like taking too much, it's like, wait a second, you cannot ask for more money. I mean, you could if you wanted, but your whole network looks green. It's like that already tells you that maybe it's not a place for me to ask for any more money because my friends have already helped me enough. So that would be the idea, that you allow for, how to say, do you know the concept of the Christmas Truce?
No.
This is, I think maybe you have heard about it. This phenomenon that happened mostly in the First World War in the trenches between the French and the German soldiers, whereby on Christmas Day, I think it happened on other days, but on Christmas Day, the French and the German soldiers would come out of the trenches and play football.
Okay.
And also another types of things that happen within this sort of concept was that they would develop this thing called live and let live, which is that they would shoot certain rounds in the air, certain bullet ammunition, and the others would as well, and they would know by these codes that they're not shooting at each other. And then the officers would come, oh yeah, you have shot, you're shooting, fine, whatever, So if they were left to their own devices, even if people with as little interaction as you seeing other people on the other side of the trench, you would be able to create a culture of let's do what is most beneficial to us, would develop through, and then it has been theorized through a wonderful thesis from the 80s called The Evolution of Cooperation. And someone make a wonderful video game, interactive video game on the internet called The Evolution of Trust, and that was my main inspiration to start to learn to code. You can actually play, it's wonderful. And this is the idea that you don't need to know people really closely to establish a certain sense of trust with regards to reciprocity in your actions. The soldiers don't know the private life of the other people on the other side of the trenches, but they knew enough to be able to know that if you do this, you expect them not to do the same to you. So everyone is good. So this is the same thing with the network. You establish this set of colors that signals to you whether this person can be trusted. Okay, I don't really know them in person because they're a friend of a friend, but they are a close friend of a close friend. And whenever I've asked for help, they've helped me. And whenever they've asked for help, I've helped them. So there is a certain, I may as well continue with this because so far it's going okay. I can trust this person for this. And that's the idea. That you strip away all the heavy context that would allow for you that would limit for you to have this relationship with only 5 people, and you extend that to 20 or more people, 400, whatever, to more people via just the minimum signal that you would need in order to establish this sense of trust via reciprocity.
Before you took the what I said about self-responsibility on one side and solidarity on the other side, and you replace it with self-made. And I think for me, both are self-responsibility and solidarity. They represent a positive lens to interact with others.
Okay.
No, and I put them in opposing polar, not because one of them is right and one of them is wrong, but I think that, as you said, like they can be both right, even though to a certain degree they can contradict each other. And when I was trying to make sense of it for myself, so what I came with, and maybe that's some kind of a maybe direction that this project can aim for, I don't know, is, and that's my personal interaction with the topic, is that by becoming self-responsible, then I develop authentic wish to support others. So as long as I see solidarity as people need to support me, I'm not actually practicing solidarity. But the moment I start to take responsibility of my well-being, then naturally I will start recognizing, okay, there's other people who might be in the condition that I am, and then therefore, it would just feel right to help them. And the second thing that I thought from the things that you just shared with me is that when I think about the human body, it's very obvious what you said, that nothing is self-made. No, like that nobody. We are part of. We are a mixture between our own decision and the influence that we have from our environment. And you see it very clearly with the body. There is, like, if you move your little finger, like the echo is going into your body, but it doesn't mean that you cannot move your finger. And that's a certain tension that I think it's interesting to look at. Like, what does it actually mean to, like, for me in my own body, it makes a lot of sense to develop the ability to move independently of other part of the body, or like to make one part of my body the leader at a certain point, knowing that this leadership is temporary. And if I insist on the leadership of one part of the body, it becomes corrupt and not, like then I need to start engaging more than actually receiving from these roles. But it's so from my perspective, I can really see it connected to the body. But, what I want to challenge you a little bit is that in your own practice, and I see you doing for something that demands a lot of solitude. Like you're a hand balancer, and before that you were practicing yoga. And even if there are social situations around those practices, like festival or classes, but nevertheless you need to spend a lot of time with yourself, no?
Yeah. First of all, about the dichotomy, thank you. I think I may have fallen into the mistake of projecting a little bit. I'm thinking that duality was a little bit of a positive, negative thinking. But I get your point, and yeah, you're totally right. Within the solitude aspect, yeah, it's true. Both hand balancing and yoga as a physical practice, they don't have any element of dance or fight, in the sense that there is no external feedback that would determine whether you go this way or that way. It's all solo. I guess, I don't know. I have sometimes thought of experiments with hand balances. Two hand balances in the air, and one trying to mimic each other, or one trying to touch each other. Or sometimes I've done things where someone is standing and they touch your foot and you move it and all that. But it's very, very limited. You're on your hands, and the main thing is the balance. It's not impossible in theory, but since it's so limited and it's a very theoretical thing, you're totally right. It is mostly a very solo practice.
And my question, or like what I'm trying to dig and understand, because I think it's interesting, is that I also see this kind of duality in what you're busy with. That on one hand, on the physical level, you're fully immersed with a practice that demands you to, like, there is no practice that needs more self-responsibility than handstand. You cannot do it if you're not doing it. It's not like I can go to a jiu-jitsu class and, just find somebody and by chance improve a little bit. But with hand balancing, you really have to own your shit. And at the same time, you are very busy on like connecting people together. And like what is this duality represent for you in your life, and like how do you
it's like going funny, like you're now establishing connections between things that I do that I haven't noticed, at least not as explicitly. So it sounds like, wow, Matan, thanks for digging into my stuff. I don't know, maybe it actually makes sense that it happens like that from the point of view of compensating, and maybe the degree of solitude that I have to go through when I exert, when I engage in my main physical practice is compensated by doing other things that are not so physical, but that they are inherently quite social in a way. I mean, also that the other stuff that I do with social stuff. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I guess you're totally right. It sounds quite possible that I'm kind of compensating with the activities in my life to try to keep the balance. Yeah, all those things in harmony. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want you to get it as some kind of a critique or something. The reason why I'm asking it because I find it interesting. First, to understand, like when I hear a smart idea, so first I'm interacting with the idea, and then I'm to a certain degree I'm gonna interact with the person who is holding the idea, and understanding the person also can help revealing some motive why this idea is actually coming into reality. And nowadays maybe many people use the personal relation to the idea as a mean to discredit the idea, but for me it's not about that. For me the interest is like, wow, like I can relate to a personal experience and understand like what is the kind of the ground that it is emerging from. And yeah, maybe the reason I was curious about it because yeah, I'm curious to figure out you a little bit more as a person, and like why was it important for you? Because if you can have the ability to sustain so much attention to yourself and take care of yourself, like where did the other aspect emerge from? But at the same time I also want to connect to many others, because I think you are developing a certain emotional skill by spending many hours with your self-training. No, at least that's how I experience it. What would you say about it? Like, do you recognize like something that you have developed on the emotional, mental level by practicing many hours with yourself?
I don't know, because to me, I would say that with all these things, as much as a lot of it is habit. And once you've spent enough time to develop the habit that enables for you to almost instinctively know that I just practice 2 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week, because that's just what I do, then I guess that once it reaches that stage, you can harness the most of it being a habit, in that it allows you to reach certain levels because of the sheer amount of hours that you put into it. And then, of course, trying to keep them focused and good practice and all that. So I don't know. I don't know whether it would really have a certain degree of emotional. What was the word that you used? Emotional maturity or emotional what?
Like like that you can call it development, inquiry, reflection, whatever word you want to put on it.
I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do we know? I know that I have a habit now that allows for me to keep practicing the amount of time that I'm practicing at the moment. I would not know. I mean, I'm subjective. I mean, I don't know whether that has allowed for me to develop any sort of like emotional connection. I mean, it certainly has, because in the same way that anything else would have allowed me to have a different emotional connection with myself. But I mean, obviously, you're not asking me to measure it and all that. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that my line of thinking about most topics would allow for me to even have an intuition about the question that you're asking, because I don't really know. I mean, I think there is a certain process of refinement of how I approach the skill of just being in the balanced position, and that has changed throughout the years. I mean, I read a lot of books while I take little breaks between handstands, because that's what I do mostly with my time. I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound like my answer is disappointing.
No, it's not disappointing. Actually, I like that we are triggering some conflict. Not conflict is a hard word, but okay, let's go with what you're saying. So maybe a bit of self-reflection from my side. So for many years, I was really driving the, like my flag was, through self-practice, you can change yourself, blah, blah, blah. So then it's like, whatever you do in your practice reflects on your life, and you can change your life by changing your practice, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then I went to the other side and said, come on, it's just total bullshit. It's like, if you want to work on yourself, it doesn't matter if you stand on your hands or do 10 pirouettes. You need to work on yourself and how you behave. And it's completely two different things. And then now I'm a little bit more in between. It's like, okay, like there is certain parallelness that we can draw from physical practice. And there is certain things that are not connected, but there's also the actual experience. If my practice is being all the time in a room of many people and collaborating with partners, I will have to confront communication. And if I'm an asshole, then, less people would want to practice with me. And, that will be my reality. But if I'm caring about others, so I might have more training partners. And if part of my practice is spending many times in my room alone, I would have time to observe my thoughts. I don't know. So there is certain things that are inevitable due to the external circumstances, and because if I go with what you're saying, then I would say like, okay, so there is no meaning to physical practice, like there's no direct meaning. And then it will bring me to a question. So like, why do people do yoga? Like there's so much cliche about, okay, a spiritual path, discovery. What do you think about that? Like, do you think it's all cliches, marketing tricks? Like, the way we are, I mean, you've been practicing yoga for many years. Do you think that this is how we are like pumping, like the motivation for people to engage in such activities? Or do you think that there is a certain realm where there is a meaning for that in our lives?
But I think both in a way, because meaning sells.
Okay.
These people say sex sells or violence sells, meaning sells, group belonging sells, So if you put all those together in one package, I'm not saying I'm not dishing it. I'm not saying it's a very legitimate things, and they may have come together not purposefully with some marketing think tank in the US. Let's sell yoga or anything like that. I mean, I'm sure there must have been some of that. But people feel good when they feel as part of something bigger than themselves, and also people feel good when. And that part bigger than themselves can be a group or can be a meaning, or it can be both together. I mean, this is the things that come into my mind right now. So there is a lot of that, and it's not to say that it's a bad thing, but yeah. So it's fine if that's what works for you. That's what works for you. I mean, of course, then you have the whole aspect that most physical practices leave you feeling good because of the chemical effect in your body, like when you go for a run or when you do a bit of yoga or something else, you just feel good. If you have not done any physical exercise. For me, for example, I remember also because I'm used to it, but there was one time where I didn't do any physical practice for 1 week and I was depressed at the end of it. So there is that element, of course, as well. But then there is also those things as well. And I think that they play a big role in how, whether the meaning is true or not, that's up to each person. I don't know. I don't think we have time to get there. Not that I could contribute with much anyway. But I think that, I think meaning and group belonging, both at the same time, even, is very powerful. And spirituality, you could put it within meaning because it's kind of a way to explain, to give meaning to things that you have no awareness of or not. I don't know. It's part of this. I'm not sure. Am I answering your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, first, you can take the freedom that you don't have to have, objective answers that are, like it's also okay that you just share your own opinion. For me, it's totally fine. And I invited you because I'm interested in your opinions. And yeah, it starts touching it because, I mean, I'm interested in that because for me, to a certain degree, what you're proposing with Weak Guild, I would say that it can be used as a, let's put this word, as a spiritual process for self-development. Just me interacting with it and, dealing with all the questions that we just brought, about giving, sharing, like I could put that on, I could, but at the same time, the probability that this is how it will be labeled is not that high, I guess. And at the other hand, if you make a photo of yourself with, hands in namaste and write something like open your heart, I don't know, people can immediately more associate like, oh, Guillermo is this spiritual guy who is like opening his heart. And so what is it for you? Like you said, spirituality maybe is meaning. What does it mean for you? So what would you say is a spiritual thing, or like where do you drive your meaning if not from the physical, like, or how is it touching you? These questions. Am I being clear or not so much?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly when you say. Can you repeat the questions, please? Or the question one at a time, maybe.
Yeah, sorry.
Really big ones and boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, sorry. I'm also in a learning phase of my role here.
No. I love it, but because the ideas are flowing and all that. But I'm thinking, I should have written something. When you see politicians writing notes, okay, one question at a time. Yeah.
No, I think it's great that we do it in the manner that we do it. That we can also allow ourselves to be transparent about the thinking process live and not to have it too prepared.
Totally. No, I like it.
So the first question maybe is like, okay, so what do you consider for your life as spiritual? As somebody who did many years of yoga, and that's why I'm interested in it, because for many people, spirituality is immediately associated with something external that they are doing. So what is it for you? Maybe nothing. I don't know, but what?
I don't know. I mean, I don't even think that I use the word that much anymore. I mean, I guess it's spiritual. I mean, I don't know. I do meditation every morning. I don't know if that answers the question, like for 20 minutes or so. And I don't know. I mean, I think to me, a very important question, and I don't know and I guess that if someone asks me, say, this is spirituality for me, to be able to separate the prescriptive from the descriptive.
Okay, develop this idea a little bit.
I was first exposed to this idea from the point of view of linguistics, because I did a degree which had a lot of linguistics in it. And it's very common for linguists to separate a descriptive grammar, which describes how a language is spoken, as opposed to a prescriptive grammar, which is how a language should be spoken. And this is something that I then came across afterwards. This is Hume's paradox. I think this was this philosopher, Scottish, I don't know, which is the is and the ought to. Yeah. Which is, you see what is, and you also have what ought to be. So it's like judgment and acceptance in a way. So I see that, for example, for me, is that, I don't know, is this what comes like a spiritual, like would be to really understand the duality between those two, whether they blend with each other, whether it's actually a spectrum or a false duality between the acceptance of this is what it is, as much as subjective as I could get in a way, and my projecting of my imagination as to what I somehow feel that things should be like, and how I accept my agency in the world to make things steer towards that direction. To me, this duality, I guess, is a very spiritual thing. Whenever I meditate, I try to just be there and having the thoughts and observing and not judging them, but then not judging myself for judging and all that kind of stuff, But you could see that everywhere. And I think that imagination and acceptance, obviously, it's just a framework. I wonder whether it has any actual physical, tangible reality in the world. But to me, that's the thought that could, to me, I would say, is the most spiritual thing that I'm engaging in lately. The observance, I guess, but that's already duality of this duality in a way. If it is a duality, of course, that's one. I don't know if that
actually, I think it's a great framework to work with. I think because I think that the hardest thing for me, at least, to accept is that two things can be true, and contradict each other at the same time. That's very hard to accept. Maybe because I'm also a very rational person. So then, if I see something that contradicts something, I try to immediately put it in a hierarchy that puts value, that elevates one idea on top of the other.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of my bodily physical practice, then I think I can let go a little bit more on that side of my mind. And then maybe experience this conflicting state more at peace. And I think that's maybe what is very hard in the way society is constructed. Not that they're like, okay, at the end of the day, you go and you vote, so you have to vote for one. You cannot say like, I'm equally voting for both because I think that both have great value. We cannot do it. So it's like you have to make a choice. You have to take a stand. But at the same time, taking a stand already, is contradictory when you think about, that, like you mentioned this kind of, you also associated this solidarity and self-responsibility into the paradigm of left and right. Both are right. And to experience it, that would make a big impact if we could, as society, actually contain these contradictions. So I think it's a good framework, what you're proposing.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of what came to my mind. I mean, I find it interesting the stuff that you were saying about the paradox, because, I mean, is it okay to call it like that? I mean, that's what kind of I think of when I think of the stuff that you describe, a paradox, right?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
In that, there are paradoxes, but you're right in saying that it doesn't mean that they are less valuable. I mean, you could say that a paradox is a bit of a funny beast from a logical point of view, although paradoxes have inspired a lot of discussion to logicians for many, many centuries. How do you deconstruct it? Why are they paradoxes? Why is it inconsistent? Is it something that in our logical system itself, or is there something that we're not noticing? And I think that in a way, normally people think of paradoxes as something that does not make sense from a rational point of view. But you could also say, you could say in a way, I'm just stretching this metaphor right now, that a magician, an illusionist, is someone who produces visual paradoxes. You're like, oh my God, he just cut her in half, but that can't be, because there is this thing of, but how can you hold these two at the same time? So you could have different, is anything that tells you senses that what is happening doesn't make sense, Also, for example, a joke in a way is not really a paradox, but it has two meanings at the same time. And you laugh instinctively. I mean, there's people who've done lots of research on humor and all that. But I think that there are some cases where maybe the paradoxes are just by design. Like, for example, the example that you mentioned about voting. By design, we cannot do that now, but there are ways in that it could be improved. Whereas sometimes there are some of the paradoxes where the whole joy of it is to give you something that tricks your senses into this state of disbelief, that sometimes some people say that is one of the most valuable places for creativity, because when you are caught off guard, you're like, oh my God, what I thought is senseless, because she obviously is not dead and it's cut her in half. What is going on? And then other things can come in. But I mean, it's the whole thing with paradox is a very interesting one. Like, and also you mentioned the thing about right and left, and whether they're both right or not. Yes, you said no politics. I'm joking. It's very interesting, because then it goes into these ideas of whether people think that something is contradictory or not, and as well, are they contradictory by design, or are they actually really contradictory because they are contradictory, or are they paradoxical, which is probably not the same as contradictory. So it's a very important thing to consider. So I guess for you as an artist as well, it's any place that triggers thinking, and probably paradoxes is something that very quickly makes you think out of the confusion, because it's almost like it strips away of all the sense of sense. Sorry for that. All the sense of sense that you thought you had, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, but she's not dead. He's cut her in half. What is going on? It's almost like you lose your identity and you realize everything I thought was, is wrong. And so it's almost like it's a perfect place for the phoenix effect to take on, and for you to kind of reconsider things when you thought that everything was done, because you had figured it all out already anyway.
When I look back at where I am now and where did I come from, so I totally see this circle of rejecting some ideas and some notions in my life just to come back to them 10 years later and actually accepting them. and if I would imagine that I'm doing all this process just to come back to the same ideas, I would say I would never walk that path.
Really?
the logical part of me would say it, because it wouldn't make sense. Why should I walk for hundreds of miles just to come back to the same point? I didn't get anywhere. No, that's the kind of rationalization of that. But then there is the idea that yes, but we experience, but yeah, there is a difference between ideas and experiences.
Yeah. I mean, to even to continue with that visual metaphor of someone walking in a circle is like, well, yeah, but you have walked in a circle, but what was your goal? To go somewhere else or to walk wherever that takes you? And if that whatever takes you is the same spot, then it's the same thing. And also by being the same spot in space, that doesn't mean it's the same spot in time. You are not the same person.
Yes, no, completely. I agree with you. Yeah, and it's I do put value on the process.
Yeah.
But I think that it's also, and this is another duality, like I do put value on the process, on what I've taken from what I've done, but I also value like, where did I get? Where am I right now? And, I see it like, I made the choice to have children. Mm-hmm. And that had radical implication on, lifestyle and responsibilities that I have to take. And of course, sometimes I have the question of like, if I wouldn't have stopped working in the tech industry, it would be much easier to finance my family now than following the fantasy train of the dance world. But on the other hand, I wouldn't be sitting now and talking to you about all these things, and I wouldn't have all this accumulated knowledge through the physical experiences. So yeah, it's hard to. So for sure, the tension is there. But like, yeah, I think it's just complicated to really, really hold those different point of view and put value on both, like an equal value on them, and not to be leaning more to one and to the other. I see many people that are so goal oriented, like that they can compromise their whole well-being just to accomplish the goal. And then you ask like, okay, but what? And on the other hand, you can see people that are so attached to the idea of the experience and where I am, but then they are completely unaware that they are just stuck in the mud and they are not actually going anywhere. And the going anywhere is, you can say it's just a judgment, because where should we go? But going in the sense of, I'm not the same person. I've learned the lessons that I had to learn on the way, and I'm not just repeating them, because you can also get stuck in repetition of the same thing, the same habits.
Totally.
Then it's like, are you really developing, or you're just like, as you said, like, I'm not learning anything from handstand anymore because it's just my habit and it's very easy to do it. I'm exaggerating what you said, no?
No, but it's a good point. I mean, I think about that sometimes, because habits, it's a double-edged sword in a way. You could fall into that and then not moving because, well, it's my habit, and if I don't do it, who am I? You lose your identity, so you're comfortable in your habits. Totally. I mean, it's funny that you said the thing about this duality between some people who are totally goal-oriented. I mean, we're caricaturizing, of course, totally goal-oriented, and they fail to notice, let's gonna put it like the joy or the beauty of the moment. And on the other end, you have people who are like, oh, I'll just go with the flow and all that. I mean, I think that's, it's gonna sound like a cliche, but it's somewhere in between those two, because yes, psychologically speaking, there is, you even have research on the idea that agency, or at least to think that you are agent of some of your reality, is very important for well-being. Like the sense of control, sense that you have agency, like I can change things in my life, whether it's bigger or a smaller scale, is very important. Of course, that depends. It's subjective and all that. But yes, you need to have a certain sense of agency that you are having an effect in the world. Whether it's material or not, it's a different story. It's very subjective. So yes, but on the other hand, appreciation for the moment is the whole duality as well, between gratefulness for everything that is, or blind ambition for something that you don't have yet. That is sort of like one way of looking at it. But then if you put the positive on the other one, you would have, exerting your agency as a basic human way of achieving some sort of fulfillment. And on the other end, you have this blind acceptance of everything, and you are so happy for anything that falls on you that it ends up becoming a sort of like a Stockholm syndrome of things are really bad for you. You're not doing anything for it, but I should be grateful for everything, And it was like, well, where do you draw the line between this? Totally.
But okay, but maybe a way to look at it that is, interesting, which is a little bit different than what you're saying, but just a thought that came now is like, if I'm practicing acceptance to the things that are challenging for me, because it's very easy to be, to be in a bliss of acceptance when, like everything is in the flow, no? It's like, yeah, I'm accepting what is happening and all the good things are coming to you. It's much harder to practice acceptance when when life collapses, like let's take, almost 1 year ago when the corona hit the fan, and, I've just seen so many people around me screaming like, what am I going to do now? My life is broken. And then I was like, yeah, but we are not in control of the environment, but you did have certain control on designing, designing your risk management in your life, and you took those choices. And it's like, so how to practice acceptance when things are challenging? And maybe on the other hand, because it's also maybe easier to be very goal-oriented when, when you want to solve a problem, but it's harder to be goal-oriented when, when everything is great, and then you can forget about, you can just indulge in the greatness. And maybe that's a certain way to balance it, like this. So even things are good now, I still pay attention to the things that, that should, like, okay, maybe my life is good, but I don't know, my wife is not happy, or, maybe that's not a good example, because it's hard to be very happy when my wife is not happy. But, like maybe I'm happy, but my neighbor is really in a bad shape now. So maybe I should also pay attention to, and, so I should expand. My goal should not be just about me, should be a bit bigger than me. What do you think?
Yes. I mean, there's different ways of looking at it. Like the one that you say about expanding, that this is connected with the idea of like whether you are an isolated unit or your well-being. It's funny because the way that you brought that up is connected to another way that is essential for people. I think there is a few things that a bit of research on what makes people happy. One of them is a certain degree of agency, although it's very subjective. And another one is people around you. Like if like some people say that there was something about the biggest correlator, not predictor, sorry, of happiness to have a good marriage or having good friends. If you're alone, you are not likely to be happy as someone who has good connections, good social network. So that would be a very good way of trying to kind of, I don't know whether you're talking about risk, because you were mentioning before risk assessment. Like, of course, it's easy to be nice when the situation is nice, but what about, are you actually getting ready for if potentially the situation will not be as nice? Is that correct?
Yeah. This, I think, I don't know if it's also international, but this story between the grasshopper and the ant, the grasshopper just jumps around and the ant is preparing for the winter, and then the winter comes and it's like, the grasshopper is like, oh, I don't have where to stay, knocks on the door of the ant. It's like, how much am I living my life in preparation for the future, and how much am I living my life now with what is suiting now at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, those are the two extremes as well, because at the same time, there are some people who could say, I'm happy to be like a grasshopper, and I am happy to die if it's to be, and because I am living a life of hedonism, for example, and if that's what they want to go along with, and as long as they are aware that they could hit you back, that's great. And then you don't know, maybe the ant is comfortable but depressed, because they're working all the time for something that they don't know if it's gonna come, and then what? And then if it comes, they're gonna derive pleasure from seeing that the grasshopper is dying and they're not. I told you. I mean, it's not great, is it? I think it's funny because this is connected to almost to this idea of I don't know how to say. Yeah, the grasshopper. I mean, it's good that you brought this metaphor because I think it's a very prototypical, but at the same time very clear way of putting these two in a spectrum, which is like, to what degree do you live the moment and to what degree do you plan? And to me, it is connected to these ideas we were saying before about to what degree you exert your imagination for something that happens in the future, and to what degree do you allow for the moment to just be there in order to just live whatever is happening. And it is connected to the idea of the neighbor that you said, like looking after others, because the ant could say, okay, I have saved for the winter and the grasshopper didn't. Should I help them? Are they getting what they deserve? Is it my responsibility to help them? Will I help them only if they promise to be a bit more wise the next time? Then the ant is the judge in a way. And this is also, I mean, I know, you're throwing lots of questions and I'm throwing lots of answers. You ask for it. And I think this is also connected to this whole idea of, especially in the movement world, there is this whole, I'm not saying whether it's more or less legitimate, this glorification of the hunter-gatherer. The hunter-gatherers, they ate great because they didn't eat grains. That was before the agricultural revolution. The hunter-gatherers were running all day around in the forest or in the savannah or in the prairie, whatever it was. And we want to do that. We want to move like them. I want to eat like them. Now, the aspect of the tribe is a different story, which is something that, I've thought about in terms of like, now it's beginning to see some tribes and all that, but that's a different story. But I'm thinking like when you establish this idea of you have more comfort in that you bring sort of like an agricultural revolution. And they were saying, yeah, but the people who were tending the fields, they had more food security, but they didn't have as full lives. For example, you have this idea of, the mortality is much lower because they're not getting eaten or being killed by each other as much as hunter-gatherers. I am extremely stereotyping, of course, I know. But their lives are a little bit more sedentary because they're not really experiencing life to the full. So it's this idea that safety or guarantees of you making it to the end of your lifespan come with comfort. I mean, the comfort that you're going to make it to the end of your lifespan. But with that comfort come sacrifices that take you away from your true nature. This video, right? People see my comments there, yeah? Okay. Which is an interesting one, because then if you continue going down that route, it's like when people say these days, like when you see all the generations complaining about, kids these days, they don't play football on the street like we used to. They're all stuck to their phones, blah, blah, blah. So it's kind of this idea of how much do you live life to the full, whatever that's meant to be? How much did you plan and you create systems that allow for you to have security, whether it's physical, food of any kind? And what is that taking you away from?
Complicated equation to balance for oneself. Because there is necessity in both. And I think that, like if you stretch any of the things that you said to the extreme, nobody will sustain it over long duration of time. If I put your life in a complete chaos, like your life will be, horrible. If there is no security about food, and there's like, you don't know if you're gonna make the night, and like you're gonna be in a post-traumatic disorder after that. If really we push it to the edge, and at the same time, if you're living under like an extreme authoritarian government that measure every movement, and like you have a very specific way that you're designed to be every moment, and like this complete order around everything that you should do, like your spirit will die. No?
Wait, I would bring couple of things into that. Only if you are aware of it. And also, why? Maybe that's what people thousands of years ago would have thought that we're doing. That what? People in their rooms talking to each other on a screen of this digital thing and not really meeting anyone outside. That's what we're doing now. It's a bit like, actually, I happened to watch The Matrix the other day, and people complain a lot about, the whole setup with The Matrix, humans being farmed, let alone that, I think anyone who complains about that should be a vegan, because that's what we've done to lots of animals and plants for thousands of years anyway. I'm not, by the way, sorry. It's not getting to vegan. Sorry. But I just think it's very interesting when I hear sometimes YouTube comments about, The Matrix is horrible farming humans. I'm thinking, you've been doing that to animals for millennia. What are you talking about? Anyway, but the idea is that it depends on what you put. When we talk about extremes, I think that it's always important to remember that extreme is only what is away from your center point, but your center point is relative. Like,
yes, of course, but still, I would say that like you stand in some center, then you're closer to one extreme than the other. But I think that there would be a certain breaking point of you like really, being beaten down by your reality if we push it to a certain extreme that is relative to your center.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Amounts of stress.
Yeah,
that is. I agree.
And when I think about balancing this in my own life, it's very complicated. It's one of the, and I think, maybe in our society we have maybe more memes and stories that amplify one strategy over the others. I would say that when I heard the story of the grasshopper and the ant, it was very clear that the ant is what I should aspire to be and not the grasshopper.
It's not like that. Yes.
That was the moral of the story. It's like, hey man, you don't want to get stuck like the grasshopper. But I had a lot of attraction to this kind of lifestyle, and I've learned a lot from like just being in the moment, not planning so much, letting things guide me. And to some extent, I think it's more connected to the nature of life, to some extent, the grasshopper experience, because things are not in our control. Who would have expected 1 year ago that we will be stuck in this situation? Nobody.
Yeah.
So life has this element of lack of chaos and unpredictability like as much as we are trying to regulate our environment, I don't think that we will really manage to reduce it to zero. So I think the grasshopper is very important element. But on the other hand, it's immediate. Sometimes I think, when I hear people who are really praising the movement lifestyle and like how everybody is wasting their time, that they are not movers, I think, what would have happened to mankind if everybody will just be obsessed with movement? We will just starve because nobody will make food. And people who are engaged in physical practice normally tend to eat a bit more because their bodies are, like we need more, like we take more calories, so we need to compensate. So like what would have happened if everybody will just take the choice of being, involved just with the moment and experiencing life through movement, and what would have happened to the world? So it's not so simple to come to a conclusion about one's life. And also it's changing. I had periods where I was really the grasshopper, and then I had periods that I was really the ant, and sometimes at the same moment. And it's complicated.
Yeah, I think to me that's kind of the key, like knowing when to be on which end, which is almost like it always reminds me to the Alcoholics Anonymous quote. Like, I mean, I'm not religious, but I like it very much because it kind of boils down to that, which is to really know where to stand when, which is God give, that one, that God give me this, the strength to withstand what I cannot change. No, the strength to change what I can change. The patience or the endurance to endure what I cannot change or something, and the wisdom to know the difference, And I'm like, yes, that is a good one, because it tells you know when to be at which end of the spectrum of these two, in a way. And I think that's kind of like the key, like being aware as much as one can of when it's time to use more of your agency in order to steer things this way, and when to step back and say, no, I'll let the wind now push me in whatever direction it needs to go. It's like, okay, it's not like this steer in the boat, or whatever metaphor you want to use. But yeah, totally. I mean, I guess yes.
Guillermo.
Yes.
We've been talking for a while, and I
haven't checked the time only a while ago. Oh my God! Yes.
Yeah.
It's gone so fast. I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's gone so fast.
Yeah, indeed. Maybe that's why it's good to pay attention for the moment, because then you can stretch time a little bit. I want to ask, like, first I want to tell you that every time I talk to you, I find you, like the way you think and the way you express yourself is very inspiring. And
thank you.
And I want to, like, for me, it was very hard to find, to find you online and to read you online. And I know, like, first, I will give you a moment to share a little bit, like, where people can get in touch with you and what you're doing. But I want to encourage you, like, to put more stuff out there, like, maybe you don't have time and maybe you're busy, but I think, like, you have a very precise way of articulating yourself. And also, like you know how to differentiate between things and to unglue things that sometimes get very, like that we like stuck in our minds, and I think it's really a good quality. So just an encouragement to put more of your ideas out there.
Are you calling me a reductionist? I'm joking. But I mean, yeah, you're right. Like, I mean, I've been thinking about putting a website together for a while, just for ideas and all that to put together. I mean, so far, I guess that the closest I have to that is the Instagram account, where although it's mostly handstand based, you do it. Some of the texts are inspired by other things like, sociology and all that, and you have all the coding aspect to it. So even with my writing, I mean, the style, of course, I guess is me, obviously. But I try to bring some of the things into play. But thank you for saying that, because I'll tell my girlfriend now, and she'll be like, "Yeah, it's about time to start making your own website." But I wanted to look good. I wanted the website to convey some of the stuff to do with systems theory and complexity theory, which we didn't talk about very much. But anyway, Tensegrity is very connected to that. So yeah, thank you for putting it there, because it's something that I really need to do ASAP. So yeah, thank you for give me a deadline, man. I want a deadline. So in 6 months, Guillermo, how do you website in 6 months?
No, man, you have to deal with your grasshopper. It's not my.
No, help me. I need your help. I want you to give me a deadline, and then I'll give you a deadline back.
No problem.
I do this in fitness, not like
that's actually
a training body.
That's actually a good idea, exchanging deadlines with strangers, or maybe also with friends. Man, so maybe you can tell a little bit of, like, okay, where people can get you and what are you offering practically, because I'm sure some people would be interested to read more and to connect more to.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, right now, there's no website. So the main thing I would say is the Instagram, which is Instagram.com/Guillermo_Justel, which I'm sure you're going to write it.
Yeah, I'm going to link everything in the description.
There's no need to spell it. And then I would say, if you're not on Instagram, you can send me an email. I'll give you the email as well, no? My personal email, if anyone wants to reach me there. But if you have an Instagram, then you don't have to have an Instagram to see all the stuff, the videos and the text. But if you want to write to me and you have Instagram, just write to me on Instagram. Otherwise, my email would be best. I don't think and yes, the website is coming. Matan has just put pressure on me. Millions of people now know that I've said 6 months. So yeah, I can feel it already. And
what about your online classes and that things? Like, is it still running?
Yeah. The timetable of the online classes is on the Instagram as well. I have now 5 online weekly handstand classes. I think it's 2 on Monday, 1 on Tuesday, and 2 on Wednesday on different centers. They're all running online. And if you go to the Instagram, there should be links to the different platforms that are offering them. So it should be clear enough. Yeah, it should be clear enough how to access each of them, whatever suits you in terms of time. I mean, I also do privates, of course, online, and online now, of course, because of lockdown. And I think that's pretty much it in terms of my teaching. And then the Instagram, I think that's pretty much it. Yeah,
and the We Guide. I will also link for the We Guide.
Of course.
That people can.
The other girl who is in charge of the marketing of We Guide is like, I can't believe that the guy interviewing you had to remind you. Sorry. He distracted me. He made me talk about something else before that. I mean, I can't be in everything. Yes, We Guild is the website mainly. So it would be www, obviously. We-Guild, which is WE-GUILD.com. That's the new website that we have, where it's the new brand thing. It's lots of animations, interactive stuff. You should check it too, because from what you told me last, you checked the old one. The .com now is public, and it has lots of nice things.
I'm going to check it right after. I'm going to check it right after we finish.
Yeah, fantastic. That'd be great, man. Hope you like that. And any feedback, welcome, of course. Always.
Sure. And now my sister moved to London recently.
Oh, really?
So as soon as we can, fly from
I know when you mean. As soon as we don't need to say anymore. As soon as we will meet.
I'm gonna definitely pay you a visit, and that we can continue the conversation.
Oh, face to face. That'd be great. That'd be nice.
Perfect. Thank you, great man. Have a wonderful day. And again, thank you for coming for my podcast.
Thank you for the invite. It's been I was already honored and humbled by your request, and I've been very it's been very nice just talking with you. It's been very entertaining in a very illustrative and educational and some just beautifully human way. So thank you so much for having me on your show.
Thank you, my friend. Ciao, ciao.
Take care. Have a good one. Ciao.
For more movement-related content and educational training programs, visit our website at www.movementlab.eu.